Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Monday, October 28th, 2024. All right, first thing, we are still fundraising. There's been kind of a stagnation in donations over the last few days. We're trying to wrap this thing up. We kind of set a goal to have it done by the election, which is next Tuesday. So let's hope we could do that. If you read antiwar.com, if you watch this show and you appreciate what we do, please go to antiwar.com/donate to help us out. If you haven't done so already, you can see the different ways that you can support us. Credit card, PayPal, crypto. I know a lot of people out there like to give crypto. We can accept all sorts of crypto. So again, help us out. Let's get this thing wrapped up so we can focus on our job. And of course, the big news over the weekend was the Israeli attack on Iran. That happened early Saturday morning, Iran time. It was Friday night here in the U.S., when this started going down. So the first story here, 4 Iranian soldiers killed by Israel's attack. So the Israeli airstrikes on Iran that were launched Saturday morning killed 4 Iranian soldiers, members of Iran's air defense force. The Iranian army said in a statement that the soldiers lost their lives, quote, while confronting the projectiles of the criminal Zionist regime in order to safeguard the security of Iran and prevent harm to the Iranian nation and interests, end quote. The Iranian military said the Israeli attack hit bases in 3 Iranian provinces, Ilam, Khuzestan, and Tehran, so the capital. The New York Times and other Western media outlets reported that Israeli airstrikes destroyed several air defense systems, but the Iranian military only confirmed that some radar systems were damaged and said that it successfully countered the attack. So the Iranian military said, quote, thanks to the timely performance of the country's air defenses, the attacks caused limited damage and a few radar systems were damaged, end quote. So it's unclear at this point if Iran will retaliate and launch another missile attack on Israel. Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian said Sunday that Iran does not seek war, but warned that there would be some sort of response. He said, quote, we do not seek war, but we will defend the rights of our nation and country. Iran will give an appropriate response to the aggression of the Zionist regime, end quote. Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei said Iranian officials will determine how to respond. He said, quote, how to convey this power and resolve of the Iranian nation to the Zionist regime is for our officials to determine, and what is in the best interest of the nation and the country should be done, end quote. So the U.S. has backed Israel's attack on Iran, saying that it has the right to self-defense. That's, the line that you saw all the American politicians falling in line and tweeting out their support of the attack, saying Israel has the right to defend itself. Of course, this came after Iran's ballistic missile attack on Israel that was launched on October 1st, and that came in response to a whole slew of escalations from Israel, including the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran. Pentagon officials told NBC News that there was no direct U.S. involvement in the strikes. We'll get more into that stuff in the next story here. But so this is the damage that's been confirmed by Iran. 4 soldiers killed. And they're saying limited damage to radar systems. Again, we see these reports saying that whole air defense systems were destroyed. It did seem initially like Iran was really downplaying the effects, but Sunday, it seemed like the rhetoric from the Iranian officials was a little sharper about it. They are saying that they're going to respond. The question is, what is that going to look like? All right, so the next one here, the U.S. was prepared to rescue Israeli pilots attacking Iran. So Israel's Army radio reported on Sunday that the U.S. placed a fleet of fighter jets in the Middle East on standby to rescue Israeli pilots if their attack on Iran failed. The report said, quote, Israel and the U.S. coordinated a plan to ensure the safe extraction of pilots should the operation have not succeeded, end quote. The report said that the U.S. did not participate directly in the attack, but was prepared to intervene for a rescue mission. It said the Americans' advanced capabilities in the region would allow them to carry out a rescue operation. So they were standing by to help out if needed. The U.S. also supported the attack by pledging to defend Israel from any retaliation and deploying the THAAD missile system for that purpose. That means U.S. troops in Israel. And, you know, another thing when we talk about this Iran's potential response, it became clear that if Israel hit nuclear facilities, oil facilities, Iran was ready to hit back hard. There was a report in the New York Times, don't know how accurate this is, but that Iran was ready to fire like 1,000 ballistic missiles at Israel if they went after civilian infrastructure. So they didn't do that. They targeted military sites. So that's another thing factored into Iran's potential response. Israeli officials said that around 100 Israeli fighter jets, spy planes, and refueling tankers were involved in the operation. The main fighter jet that was used was the U.S.-made F-35. So, of course, the U.S. also supported the attack by giving Israel all the military aid that it provides. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said the U.S. was responsible for the attack since it provided Israel with an air corridor for its jets to launch the airstrikes. He said, quote, the Americans gave the Zionist Air Force an air corridor, and the defense facilities they sent them before can be considered collaboration with the recent operation. We consider that America's collaboration with the Zionist entity to create tension in the region is something very clear, end quote. Iranian officials said that the Israeli jets launched the strikes from U.S.-controlled Iraqi airspace, and there was a lot of response inside Iraq from the Shia factions who are not happy about this. Kata'ib Hezbollah, which is one of the Iraqi Shia militias that's allied with Iran, has said that the U.S. must pay for letting the Israeli jets use Iraqi airspace. The group said, quote, America must pay the price for their recklessness in using Iraqi airspace, and this will happen with God's help at the right time and place. They will certainly dare to attack Iraq if they do not pay a heavy price for their aggression, end quote. So this is another thing, you know, this U.S. support for Israel. We saw last year, right after October 7th, the Shia militias, you know, launched like over 100 attacks on U.S. bases in Iraq and Syria. It culminated with 3 U.S. troops being killed in Tower 22, that base right on the border with Syria, but actually inside Jordan. So there's always a chance of that, something like that starting up again. We still see those attacks once in a while, and there have been some U.S. troops injured in recent months. So, and you know, Iran's making it clear that they view the U.S. as complicit in this attack. So if Iran does decide to hit back, which right now, I mean, I don't think that they're going to launch any sort of big ballistic missile attack in response to this. That's just my feeling right now. Could be wrong. But I think if they did, it would probably be pretty big. And if they do it and they know, all right, this means full-blown war, the U.S. is going to be involved, that means that they might really go big and hit some U.S. Assets in the region as well. I think that's possible. But there's also the possibility here of these Iraqi militias just starting, you know, kind of restarting their campaign against the U.S. forces in Iraq and Syria. All right, so the next one here, the U.S. and the U.K. alone in expressing support for Israel's strike on Iran. So this is from the Cradle. This is interesting, kind of the global response. In the wake of Israel's long-anticipated attack on Iran early on October 26th, Arab and Islamic countries responded by issuing harsh condemnations of Israel for its aggression, while the U.S. and the U.K. expressed their support for Israel's assault, claiming it was in self-defense. Israel's military claimed it carried out precise strikes. They do a little background on the strikes here, and then they just kind of compiled statements. So again, you have the U.S. and the U.K. fully supportive of what Israel did. And France put out a statement, kind of neutral statement, saying both sides should refrain from escalation. France said, quote, this is France's foreign ministry, France urges the parties to refrain from any escalation an action likely to aggravate the context of extreme tension prevailing in the region, end quote. So, and then also the U.S. is saying that they're telling Iran not to respond. The UK is saying that as well. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz stated he warned Iran. Wait, sorry. I messed that up. His statement warned Iran did not express support for Israel's actions, but warned Iran not to retaliate. So he didn't express support for Israel, but also warned Iran not to retaliate. He said, quote, "My message to Iran is clear. We cannot continue with massive reactions of escalation. This must end now. This will provide an opportunity for peaceful development in the Middle East," end quote. In contrast, Jordan's foreign ministry condemned the Israeli attack, calling it a violation of international law, an infringement of sovereignty, and a serious escalation that threatens regional stability. Saudi Arabia also condemned the Israeli assault, but did not mention Israel in the statement. The Saudi statement said, quote, "The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia expresses its condemnation and denunciation of the military targeting of the Islamic Republic of Iran, which is a violation of its sovereignty and a violation of international laws and norms," end quote. And these are countries that the U.S. and Israel want to form some sort of anti-Iran alliance with. The Egyptian Foreign Ministry said that it was gravely concerned over the escalation, including the Israeli attack. The UAE said that it strongly condemned the attack, and remember, they opened up with Israel a few years ago. Iraq was very unhappy about it. Qatar expressed strong condemnation. Turkey, of course, said it expressed its strongest condemnation. And obviously Hamas issued a statement against it. So just thought that was interesting, kind of the different responses. All right, the next one here, Israel destroys Kamal Adwan Hospital in northern Gaza. So on Saturday, Israeli forces withdrew from the Kamal Adwan Hospital in Beit Lahia, northern Gaza, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. Israeli forces pulled out of the area after a siege on the hospital that lasted over 20 days. Israeli tanks fired on the hospital before troops stormed the facility and detained dozens of staff members and some patients. So in the last show, which I recorded late Thursday night, I went over the Israeli shelling of the hospital. Then early Friday morning, Israeli troops actually stormed the hospital. Maysoon Alian, a nurse at Kamal Adwan, said, quote, "We were surrounded from all sides. There was shooting from all directions with bombs and mortars," end quote. Medics said that at least 2 children died in the intensive care unit on Friday after Israeli fire hit generators and oxygen tanks at the hospital. So 2 children died as a result of that. And the Israeli attack also killed the son of Dr. Hussam Abu Safia, who's the hospital's director. He said, quote, "Everything we built, they have burned. They have burned our hearts. They killed my son," end quote. So according to Reuters, Israeli forces arrested at least 44 out of the 70-member hospital staff and later released 14, including Abu Safia, the director. Alian, the nurse, said that the men who were detained were humiliated because they were forced to take off their clothes. And there was pictures that came out of, them lining up these men with no clothes on. It just, man, some of these images that are coming out, the way that they're marching them and humiliating them. And there's reports, of course, of them executing some of these Palestinians that they detain. So Abu Safia said there are now only 2 doctors at the hospital for 145 patients and that no surgery services are available. He's calling for humanitarian corridors to allow more healthcare workers into the area and for patients who need surgery to be evacuated. He said, quote, "We have called on the world pleading to open a humanitarian corridor and bring in medical teams that can save those who can be saved," end quote. So this is in North Gaza, where Israel has been trying to carry out this ethnic cleansing / extermination plan. And it's focused on this area. Bet Lahia is right near Jabalia. That's really where it's been focused. And there's been a complete siege on northern Gaza. The head of Gaza's civil defense told NBC News on Sunday that there have been approximately 1,000 people killed, 1,000 Palestinians killed by Israel in the north since this thing started at the beginning of the month. And then there was Israeli strikes in Bet Lahia on Saturday that killed at least 35 Palestinians. Middle East Eye reported that northern Gaza's health system is now completely out of service following the Israeli attack on Kamal Adwan. And of course, Israel always justifies its attacks on Gaza hospitals by claiming that Hamas members are present at these hospitals, but they never offer evidence for these claims. And those American healthcare workers, 99 of them, who volunteered in Gaza, all said that they did not see any militant activity at the hospitals they worked at. All right, so the next one here, Israel kills 5 journalists in Sunday Gaza attacks. This article is from Jason Ditz. Israel has come under growing international criticism for its deliberate attacks on journalists. That does not seem to be impacting Israeli policy, as 5 more journalists were reported killed today in attacks across the Gaza Strip. And this was on Sunday. 5 journalists killed in one day. The victims of the attack included Saeed Radwan with Al-Aqsa TV, Hamza Abu Salmiya with Sanad News Agency, Haneen Baroud with Al-Quds Foundation, Abdul Rahman Al-Tanani with Saut Al-Shab, and Nadia El-Sayed, who works for multiple outlets. So 5 journalists. I mean, man. And 3 of them were all killed in an Israeli attack on a UN school in the Al-Shati refugee camp, where people were sheltering from the ongoing attacks. 9 civilians overall, including the 3 journalists, were slain in the attack. The other 2 were killed in separate attacks. So this brings the number of journalists killed by Israel in Gaza to at least 180. And this toll is on top of those killed in other Israeli wars, including 3 Lebanese journalists were killed in a Israeli attack on Friday. 3 Lebanese journalists in one attack, all killed. I mean, this is just a shocking number of journalists being killed here. And it just doesn't stop. And there's also those 6 Al Jazeera journalists they recently claimed are Hamas propagandists or something, essentially implying that they're fair game. So as far as I know, none of them have been killed yet. All right, so the next one here. Plight of Gaza civilians unbearable as Israel kills over 50 in a day. This article is from Al Jazeera. So the health ministry did not put out the daily update on Sunday, but Palestinian medics told Al Jazeera that Israeli attacks killed more than 50 Palestinians across the Gaza Strip in less than a day, most of them in the north, which has been the scene of renewed Israeli ground offensive for the past 3 weeks, leading the chief of the UN to call the plight of civilians there unbearable. So at least 11 Palestinians were killed and dozens of others wounded after a school in northern Gaza was hit. The Israeli military said it was looking into the report on the school. They always call the schools, Hamas command centers. And again, never any evidence there. The Israeli military claimed that it killed more than 40 Hamas fighters in the Jabalia area in the past 24 hours. Israeli military strikes on the towns of Jabalia, Bet Hanun, and Bet Lahia in northern Gaza have so far killed about 800 people. So in those areas, it's about 800, but they're saying over 1,000 in all of northern Gaza. So it's just the violence has just been unrelenting. All right. So the next one here, DOD audit on Israeli military aid will not investigate rights violations. This article is from Connor Freeman at the Libertarian Institute. The Pentagon's Inspector General has launched its audit covering the military's oversight of U.S. military aid provided to Israel for its war against the Palestinians in the besieged Gaza Strip. However, the audit will not investigate whether the over 50,000 tons of weapons transferred to Tel Aviv are being used to commit human rights violations, including those actions which break both U.S. and international law. So proper use, storage, and physical security of U.S. weapons and equipment such as drones, missiles, and night vision devices is what the IG will be evaluating. The IG's office issued a press release stating that the audit will be carried out per the Pentagon's enhanced monitoring process of accounting for sensitive defense articles. So basically they're saying, and then there was actually a spokesperson from the IG's office who told Bloomberg that audit will not have anything to do. We're not going to investigate any of the atrocities being committed with U.S. weapons. This is more about, again, oversight, waste, and things like that they will look into. I wonder if anything will come out, because the Pentagon, the U.S. has not been transparent at all when it comes to weapon shipments to Israel. With Ukraine, I mean, I'm sure there are things that they're not telling us, but whenever they announce a new weapons package for Ukraine, they put out a press release and list everything that they're sending. Again, they hide things in different ways, but comparing Ukraine to Israel, the transparency, there's just much more when it comes to Ukraine. Just in what kinds of weapons they're sending. With Israel, we just don't even really know. Like, we always kind of learn from just U.S. officials speaking anonymously to the media, how many X amount of bombs that they've sent and things like that. So I wonder if anything like that's going to come out. But they're not going to be looking into, there's all these violations of foreign assistance laws. You would think that'd be something an inspector general might be interested in, but I guess not. Not when it comes to Israel. All right, so the next one here, Israel has killed 164 health workers in Lebanon. So on Saturday, Israeli strikes targeted the southern Lebanese municipality of Bazourieh, killing a civil defense medic and wounding 5 people. Lebanon's health ministry said the killing of the medic brought the total number of health workers killed by Israeli strikes since October 2023 to 164. And what's the death toll is around 2,500, over the past year. So 164 of those have been medical workers. Lebanese Health Minister Dr. Faras Abiad told reporters that Israel has launched at least 200 attacks on first aid agencies and attacked hospitals 58 times. The Israeli campaign in Lebanon has forced 8 hospitals to close, and 7 other hospitals are only partially functioning. The Sahel General Hospital in Haret Harik, which is just south of Beirut, was recently forced to evacuate over Israeli claims that a stash of Hezbollah money and gold was stored under a bunker in the hospital. Journalists went there and found no evidence of the claim. Israeli strikes have also targeted 158 ambulances, 57 fire trucks, and 15 rescue vehicles. So, I mean, this is just a targeting of, it seems mostly to be kind of first responders, paramedics, people like that. And this was happening before the big escalation in September. Jason was covering a lot of these Israeli strikes, and there were quite a few incidents of them bombing ambulances and killing paramedics. So just really, so the latest number from Lebanon's health ministry put out Saturday, at least 2,672 people have been killed since October 2023. So 164 of them, healthcare workers. All right, so the next one here, Israeli airstrikes kill 8 civilians in southern Lebanon town. So this is another one from Jason. Israel has issued evacuation orders for a huge amount of civilian areas of Lebanon, particularly in the south. This has displaced over 1 million people who are fleeing to any place outside the evacuation. Getting outside those areas does not mean that they're safe from attacks, however. This was underscored today, which is Sunday, when Israel carried out multiple airstrikes on a residential building in the town of Haret Saida in southern Lebanon. The town was not covered by any of the evacuation orders, and so over 17,000 displaced civilians fled to the town, packing its residential district. Then the missiles came anyhow. The resulting attack killed 8 people and wounded at least 27, all of them civilians. One of the slain was a child. There were some early reports that the attacks aimed to kill Hezbollah member Hussein Fanaish, and that most of the slain were members of his family. There's no indication he was killed or even present during the strikes. Again, we've seen this in Gaza. They tell people to evacuate. These are the safe zones, and then they bomb the safe zones. They've really been doing that in Lebanon quite a bit lately. All right, so the next one here, Israeli TV presenter blows up a building in Lebanon. So this article is from Middle East Eye. So an Israeli TV presenter has come under criticism after being filmed blowing up a building in Lebanon during a broadcast. Danny Kushmaro, a news presenter on Channel 12, was shown wearing a bulletproof vest and helmet while a soldier instructed him how to detonate an explosive device. So this Israeli journalist actually blows up, you know how we've seen Israel, and this is another thing, this is Lebanon, this isn't Gaza, but they're packing buildings with explosives and blowing them up. We've seen them do that in several villages now. And this is, you know, in the video they claim, oh, you see this building, they fire rockets from it, so we have to blow it up. You know, that's the justification here, but it's clearly they're doing a similar campaign of just destruction in southern Lebanon. So an Israeli journalist actually detonated the explosives. I mean, it's just crazy, you know, especially you talk about the claims, and this is what other Israeli journalists were, you know, saying that in their criticism. Actually, this is Ofer Kasif, who's a member of the Israeli Knesset for the Hadash party. He pointed out the irony that the following report on the Channel 12 bulletin focused on Hamas terrorists disguised as journalists. So Channel 12 showed one of its journalists blowing up buildings in Lebanon, and then I guess the next segment was about them accusing journalists in Gaza of being Hamas. So, I mean, man, really crazy. All right, so the next one here, the U.S. okays $2 billion in new arms deals for Taiwan. So on Friday, the State Department approved 2 potential arms deals for Taiwan worth about $2 billion, drawing a sharp rebuke from China. So the Pentagon's Defense Security Cooperation Agency said one of the deals is for 3 National Advanced Surface-to-Air Missile Systems, or the NASAMS, and related equipment. It has an estimated cost of $1.16 billion. I believe this is the first time Taiwan is getting this air defense system. I know the U.S. has sent some to Ukraine. The other deal is for radar systems and is worth about $828 million. So the approval of the arms sales, it starts a period when Congress could potentially block the deals, but there's no opposition in Congress for arming Taiwan, so they're not going to have a problem. In response to the approval of the arms sales, a Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson said that China, quote, strongly condemns and firmly opposes it and has lodged solemn representations with the United States, and quote, they warned that China will, quote, take all necessary measures to firmly defend national sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity, end quote. So these new sales come as tensions are very high between the U.S. and China over Taiwan. The U.S. is ignoring China's constant warnings that Taiwan is a red line. They call it the first red line in U.S.-China relations that must not be crossed. And so I just mentioned here, so this is a weapons sale. As far as I know, this is not going to be paid for with U.S. military aid, but I guess that could change because when they approve these deals, there's still a long way to go before they actually go through. But I just mentioned the U.S. has sold weapons to Taiwan since 1979. That was the year that Washington cut relations with Taipei as part of the U.S.-China normalization deal. So the U.S. always sold weapons to Taiwan since then, but last year they started giving them military aid funded by the U.S. government. So that was a big escalation, and Biden approved a $500 million weapons package for Taiwan last month using military aid. All right, so the last story here, half of U.S. arms sent to Ukraine lacked documentation. This article is from Kyle Anzalone at the Libertarian Institute. The Department of Defense Inspector General reviewed hundreds of weapon shipments to Ukraine, finding that half lacked proper documentation. The report released by the Pentagon IG on October 18th examined hundreds of arms transfers to Ukraine that occurred in the first months after the Russian invasion in 2022. The arms transfers totaled $2.1 billion. The investigation found that over 50%, $1.1 billion, of weapons shipments to Kiev lacked the required paperwork. The study is not the first review of arms transfers to Ukraine to find that the Pentagon's documentation falls short of the requirements. The IG has said that a lack of training and a rush to get weapons to Ukraine are the cause of the lack of proper documentation. The report says, quote, the quick reaction led to a breakdown in internal controls, end quote. So over the past 2 years, the U.S. has given or promised around $60 billion in military aid to Ukraine. And it's unclear if the Pentagon improved the documentation. So this is, again, from 2022, right when they first started just dumping all these weapons into Ukraine. So that is it for the news for today. Go check out our viewpoints. One from Representative John J. Duncan Jr. American healthcare workers plead for end to Gaza bombing. One from Ted Galen Carpenter. Trump, Harris, and the lesser of two evils. One from Ramsey Baroud. The myth of Israel's 7 war fronts. One from Doug Bandow. It is time to talk to North Korea. And our spotlight is from Jeremy Hammond. Israeli war crimes documented by the Israeli Defense Forces. So please go check all of that out. Again, help us out with our fundraiser if you can. If you can't do that, you could also support us by sharing this show. You could retweet our posts on Twitter about the fundraiser. Follow, subscribe, all that stuff. Comment. Everything helps out. I appreciate everyone who watches and listens to this show. I hope everybody had a good weekend. There's a lot going on in the news. But I did watch the Yankees lose 2 World Series games, which I know a lot of people are probably happy about. I know if you're not a Yankees fan, you don't like, people really don't like the Yankees. But anyway, I will be back tomorrow with some more news. Thanks for listening.